Where exactly are you headed at this hour?
Riverdale, sir. I have to start my new job at 7 a.m.
That is 7 miles away. Did you walk all this way already?
I walked 11 miles. My car broke down. I need this job.
That's a long way. You told me you were walking 7 miles out here at 5 in the morning?
Yes, sir. My shift starts at 6. Bus don't run that early.
Man, that's some dedication. Most folks would have turned around or
Sick days
called
don't
off.
cover the rent. Gotta show up.
Ever think about getting a bike or something?
Been saving. Till then, my feet do the job.
Well, ma'am, I need to tell you about your new employee.
Is something wrong? Did she do something?
She walked 11 miles since 1 a.m. Car died yesterday.
She walked? In the dark? By herself?
Found her at mile 11. 7 more to go. Still walking.
The cold early morning of December 19th, 2025, found Keisha Williams, a 28-year-old single mother, walking along a poorly lit rural highway at 5:01 a.m., as she had done 6 days a week for the last 14 months. She had left her home at 2:30 a.m., beginning the 18-mile journey that would take her to her 7 a.m. opening shift at a breakfast diner where she worked as a cook, a walk that took approximately 4.5 hours depending on weather and how tired her legs were from the previous shift. Keisha wore worn sneakers she had repaired with glue multiple times, carried a backpack containing her work uniform and packed lunch, and maintained a steady pace she had perfected through hundreds of identical journeys. But when patrol lights lit up behind her, and Officer Marcus Thompson pulled over to question what she was doing, walking alone in a remote area before dawn, neither had any idea. The next 20 minutes would change both their lives in ways they could never have anticipated. Keisha Williams had grown up in a small town, approximately 30 miles from where she now lived, daughter of a mother who had worked 3 jobs to raise 4 children alone after Keisha's father had abandoned them when Keisha was 6. Keisha had learned early about hard work and sacrifice, about doing what was necessary to survive, even when circumstances seemed impossible. She had graduated high school, despite having to work night shifts at a gas station to help her mother with bills, had tried community college but had to drop out when she became pregnant at 19, with a boyfriend who promised to stay but disappeared before the baby was born. Now, Keisha had a 9-year-old son named Marcus, named after the grandfather she never knew, and she was determined to give him opportunities she had never had. She worked at the breakfast diner from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., earning $12.50 per hour, then came home to spend 3 hours with Marcus helping with homework and ensuring he ate a proper dinner before going to a second job from 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. cleaning offices in a commercial building for $11 per hour. Between 2 jobs and occasional weekend shifts picking up overtime hours wherever she could find them, Keisha rarely slept more than 5 hours per night. 3 months ago, Keisha's car, a 2004 Honda Civic she had bought for $1,800 and that had 247,000 miles on the odometer, had finally died completely. The mechanic said fixing it would cost over $3,000, money Keisha simply didn't have, given she was living literally paycheck to paycheck while paying rent, keeping Marcus fed and clothed, and trying to save something for emergencies. Keisha had tried to figure out alternative transportation, but the public bus system in her rural area was extremely limited, with no routes going to her diner job location and only occasional buses that didn't match her work schedules. So, Keisha had started walking, 18 miles from her home to the diner every morning, at a walk she began at 2:30 a.m. to ensure she arrived at work by 7 a.m. with time to change clothes and prepare before her shift started. After work at the diner, a generous friend gave her a ride back home, which saved Keisha from having to make the return journey immediately. She spent a few hours with Marcus, then walked 3 miles to her night cleaning job, and after that walked 3 miles back home, usually arriving around midnight. A few hours of sleep, then the cycle began again. It was a brutal existence that was taking its toll on Keisha's body. Her feet were constantly blistered and sore. Her legs and back ached from the constant mileage. She had lost weight she couldn't afford to lose because she usually gave most of her food to Marcus. But she kept going, driven by love for her son and determination not to let him see her give up, not to allow their circumstances to force her to depend on public assistance that would come with judgment and restrictions that would make already difficult life even more complicated. Officer Marcus Thompson was a 12-year veteran of the County Sheriff's Department, father of 3 children, and generally a conscientious officer who took his work seriously, but treated people with respect. He had been patrolling the early morning route when he saw a solitary figure walking along the shoulder of the highway in an area known for occasional drug activity and where prostitutes sometimes met clients. His training and experience told him someone walking alone in that area at that time of morning was potentially involved in criminal activity or was in danger, that he should stop and check the situation. Marcus activated his patrol lights and pulled over beside Keisha. When she looked at the patrol car, he could see an expression on her face that wasn't guilt or fear, but simply exhaustion, the resignation of someone who was too tired for anything but continuing to move forward. Marcus rolled down his window and called out, asking where exactly she was headed at this hour. His dash camera recorded the entire encounter, capturing every word and every expression that would paint a picture of two worlds colliding. Keisha stopped walking and turned to face the officer, her body language showing nothing defensive or furtive, but simply the deep weariness of someone who had been on their feet and moving for hours. She said she was going to work, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of exhaustion that came from months of inadequate sleep and relentless physical effort. Marcus looked at her more closely, noticing her clean but clearly worn clothes, the backpack that seemed to contain personal belongings rather than anything suspicious, the sneakers that had seen much better days. He asked where she worked, genuinely confused about how someone could be heading to work at 5 in the morning, on foot on a rural highway. Keisha explained she worked at the Sunrise Diner, approximately 15 miles ahead, that her shift started at 7 and she needed time to get there. Marcus did quick mental math, realizing if she was 15 miles away and her shift started at 7, she had been walking for hours, already. He asked why she wasn't driving or taking a bus. Keisha said simply her car had broken down and there was no bus service going where she needed to go. The simplicity of her answer, delivered without self-pity or elaboration, struck Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. Marcus asked Keisha how long she had been making this walk. She said 14 months since her car died. Marcus felt disbelief washing over him. 14 months of walking 18 miles to work. He asked if she did this every day. Keisha said 6 days a week, that she had Sundays off, but usually picked up extra shifts at the diner anyway because she needed the money. She added she also worked a second job at night. Another 3 miles of walking in each direction. Marcus sat in his patrol car trying to process what she was saying, implicitly comparing his own life, where he drove 20 minutes to work in a comfortable car, against what this woman faced daily. Marcus asked if Keisha had family or friends who could help her with transportation. Keisha explained her mother had passed away 2 years ago, that she had no siblings living nearby, and that while a friend gave her a ride from the diner back home after her morning shift, asking for more than that, when the friend had her own family and job, seemed like too much. She said her son Marcus stayed with a neighbor during mornings, and she was back home in time to pick him up after school most days. The mention of a son made Officer Marcus realize this woman wasn't just walking 18 miles to work. She was doing this as a single mother trying to support a child. Marcus asked how old her son was. Keisha said 9, that he was in 4th grade, that he was a good student and never missed school. There was pride in her voice when she talked about her son, pride that cut through the exhaustion. Marcus thought about his own 3 children at home, about how his wife drove them to school every morning while he slept after night shifts, about all the small things he took for granted. He asked Keisha if she didn't qualify for some type of assistance that could help with transportation or expenses. Keisha explained she earned just slightly too much between her 2 jobs to qualify for most assistance programs, that the system was set up in a way that working hard and trying to support herself actually penalized her, compared to if she simply stopped working and depended on benefits. She said she had tried to save for a replacement car, but that between rent, feeding, and clothing Marcus, and all the other expenses of living, she could barely put away $50 a month. At the rate she was saving, it would take years to buy even a reliable used car. Marcus sat in silence for a moment, his dash camera recording his expression as he processed everything Keisha had told him. He had stopped her suspecting possible criminal activity, or that she might be in danger. But what he had found was a person working harder than most people he knew, making sacrifices he could barely comprehend, all while maintaining dignity and refusing to give up. Marcus asked Keisha if she wanted a ride to work. Keisha hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to accepting help, then said she would appreciate it, but only if it wasn't taking him out of his way. Marcus told Keisha to get in the patrol car, that he would drive her to the diner. As she settled into the passenger seat, he could see relief on her face. Physical relief from not having to walk another 10 miles, but also something deeper, perhaps recognition that someone had actually seen her situation and offered to help without judgment or conditions. As Marcus drove toward the diner, he asked questions about Keisha's life, about how she managed 2 jobs and raising a son, about what kept her going when everything seemed impossible. Keisha talked about Marcus, about how he was the reason she did anything. She said she wanted him to see that no matter how hard things got, you kept working. You never gave up. You found a way. She talked about how she had grown up watching her mother work herself to the bone to keep them fed and sheltered, how she had promised herself she would do the same for her son. Keisha said she knew her situation wasn't ideal, that she knew Marcus deserved a mother who could spend more time with him, who could buy him things other kids had, but that she was doing absolutely the best she could with what she had. Marcus found himself deeply moved by Keisha's determination and by the complete absence of self-pity. He had stopped countless people during his career, had heard every excuse and story imaginable, but there was something about Keisha's straightforward honesty and her refusal to present herself as a victim that struck him differently. When they arrived at the Sunrise Diner, it was 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before Keisha's shift was to begin. Marcus told her to wait a moment before getting out of the car. He reached for his wallet and pulled out $100, extending it to her. Keisha looked at the money and shook her head, saying she couldn't accept it, that the ride was already more than enough. Marcus insisted, saying he wanted to help, that $100 wouldn't make a difference in his finances, but could make a difference in hers. Keisha remained firm, saying she didn't accept charity, that she worked for everything she and Marcus had. Her refusal wasn't rude or defensive, but simply a firmly held principle about maintaining her dignity and independence even when accepting help would be easier. Marcus respected Keisha's refusal, but told her if she changed her mind, the offer remained open. He then asked if she would mind if he stopped to give her a ride occasionally when he saw her walking, that his patrol route frequently took him down this highway during early morning shifts. Keisha considered for a moment, clearly weighing pride against the practical reality that every ride meant hours saved of walking and energy conserved that she needed for work. She said she would appreciate it, but only if it really wasn't inconvenient. Marcus said it wasn't inconvenient at all, that in fact it would make him feel better, knowing she wasn't walking alone in the darkness. As Keisha got out of the patrol car and grabbed her backpack, Marcus watched her walk toward the diner entrance. She moved with determination despite obvious weariness, straightening her posture as she approached the door, as if mentally preparing for the shift ahead. Marcus sat in his car for several minutes after she went inside, thinking about the encounter he had just had. He thought about how easily he could have simply checked her ID and moved on, as most officers probably would have done. But something about Keisha's situation, about the pure willpower it took to do what she was doing daily, had touched something in him. Marcus returned to patrol but found himself distracted for the rest of his shift. When he arrived home that morning, his wife Jennifer immediately noticed something was on his mind. After he finished breakfast and the kids left for school, Marcus told Jennifer about Keisha. He described encountering her walking on the dark highway, learning about her 18-mile walk, hearing about her 2 jobs, and son at home and broken-down car she couldn't afford to fix. Jennifer listened with growing amazement, asking how anyone could maintain such a schedule without completely collapsing. Marcus said he was thinking about what they could do to help. Jennifer immediately suggested starting an online fund to raise money for a car for Keisha. Marcus hesitated, remembering how firmly Keisha had refused his $100, how clear she had been about not accepting charity. Jennifer pointed out there was a difference between giving someone money and a community coming together to help a working member who needed a hand. She said if they framed it appropriately, focusing on Keisha's story of hard work and determination rather than pity, maybe she would accept. Marcus decided to talk to his supervisor about the situation, partly to ensure there would be no issues with him providing occasional rides to Keisha, partly because he wanted advice on how to proceed. Captain Rodriguez listened to Marcus's account of the encounter, then asked if Marcus had dash camera recording of the encounter. Marcus confirmed he did. Rodriguez asked to see it, saying he wanted to understand the situation fully before making any decisions about how the department should respond. Rodriguez watched the footage twice observing Keisha's expression as she explained her situation, noting the complete absence of evasion or manipulation in her answers, seeing the genuine exhaustion and determination in her demeanor. Rodriguez told Marcus this was exactly the type of story the department should be involved with, that the community needed to know officers didn't just enforce law, but recognized and responded to people who needed help. He suggested the department could post an edited version of the dash camera footage on the department's social media page with an explanation of Keisha's situation and a link to a fund if her family created one. Marcus contacted Jennifer, who contacted Keisha through the diner where she worked. Jennifer explained she was the wife of the officer who had given Keisha a ride, that they wanted to help, and that they were thinking about starting an online fund to raise money for a car for her. Keisha's initial reaction was to refuse, saying she didn't want to be anyone's charity project. But Jennifer gently persisted, explaining this wasn't about pity, but about a community helping someone who was working incredibly hard, but just needed a small hand to overcome difficult circumstances. Jennifer told Keisha her story was inspiring, that people would hear about what she was doing every day and would want to help. She noted accepting help wasn't weakness, but recognition that no one got through life completely alone, that everyone needed assistance sometimes. Jennifer added that by accepting help, Keisha would actually be giving a gift to others, allowing them to feel they had made a difference in someone's life. The argument resonated with Keisha, who finally agreed reluctantly, but with the condition any money raised be used specifically for a reliable car that would allow her to continue working. Jennifer created a fundraising page titled, "Help Keisha Get a Car for Work." She wrote a detailed description of Keisha's situation, explaining the 18-mile walks, 2 jobs, raising a son as a single mother, and refusal to give up despite impossible circumstances. Jennifer included a photo of Keisha she had taken at the diner, an image showing a young woman with tired eyes but determined smile, wearing her cook's uniform. The description emphasized Keisha wasn't asking for help, but that the community wanted to support someone who embodied the spirit of hard work and perseverance. The sheriff's department posted an edited version of the dash camera footage on its Facebook page, with a caption explaining Officer Thompson had encountered this remarkable woman during early morning patrol, that her story had touched him deeply, and that the department wanted to share it to inspire others and potentially help Keisha achieve the stability she deserved. The post included a link to the fundraising page, but made clear there was no obligation to donate, that simply sharing the story was valuable. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 hours, the fundraising page had raised $2,000. Within 6 hours, it had passed $10,000. People commented on the Facebook post, sharing their own stories of struggling to get to work, of being single parents making the impossible work, of recognizing the type of strength it took to do what Keisha was doing. Some donors were law enforcement officers from different departments who were moved by the story. Others were complete strangers who simply wanted to help. Multiple local car dealerships contacted Jennifer, offering to sell a car to Keisha at cost or donate a vehicle completely. Local news media picked up the story, sending reporters to interview Keisha at the diner during her break. Keisha was visibly uncomfortable with the attention, but graciously answered questions about her routine, about why she made the sacrifices she made. When a reporter asked what kept her going, Keisha simply pointed to a photo of Marcus in her wallet and said as long as her son needed her, she would find a way to show up. The interview clip aired on the evening news and was then shared widely on social media, bringing even more attention to Keisha's story. Within 3 days, the fundraising page had raised over $85,000, an amount so far beyond what anyone had anticipated that Jennifer had to contact Keisha to discuss what to do with excess funds. Keisha was completely overwhelmed by the numbers, barely believing so many people would care enough to contribute. She insisted she only needed a reliable car, that any money beyond what was necessary for this should be donated to organizations helping other working families struggling with transportation or poverty. Jennifer suggested instead that extra funds could go toward a savings fund for Marcus's education. But Keisha was hesitant, feeling accepting money for a car was one thing, but accepting money for her son's future seemed like too much. Captain Rodriguez worked with the department's social media team to manage ongoing attention on the story. He was careful to ensure Keisha wasn't presented as a charity case, but as an example of resilience the community wanted to support. He was also Aware media attention could be both a burden and a blessing, so he assigned a public relations officer to serve as a buffer between Keisha and the influx of interview requests and assistance offers. The department wanted to help without turning Keisha's life into a public spectacle. Marcus Thompson continued providing rides to Keisha when his patrol routes aligned with her walk, but now he was just one of several officers from the department who voluntarily adjusted their routes to pass by the highway during Keisha's early morning walking time. The officers had created an informal communication system where they texted each other about picking up Keisha, ensuring she rarely had to walk the full distance. Keisha was grateful, but also slightly embarrassed by the attention, preferring when she could simply do her work without being treated as someone special. A local car dealership, Springfield Auto, offered to donate a certified pre-owned 2018 Honda Accord with only 45,000 miles. The law owner, a man named Robert Chen, had seen Keisha's story on the news and felt compelled to help in a substantial way. Chen had immigrated to the United States 25 years ago with nothing and had built a successful business through exactly the type of hard work Keisha was demonstrating. He said in an interview that giving Keisha a reliable car was his way of paying it forward and honoring the type of determination that had allowed him to achieve success. When Keisha was driven to the dealership to meet Chen and receive the car, she was accompanied by Marcus Thompson, Jennifer, Captain Rodriguez, and multiple reporters who had been invited to document the moment. Keisha walked through the showroom, looking overwhelmed, her eyes filling with tears as Chen led her to the silver Accord and handed her the keys. Chen told her the car came with 3 years of free maintenance, that his team had ensured it was in perfect condition, and that she should never worry about how to pay for repairs or service because his dealership would cover those costs. Keisha tried to thank Chen, but emotion made it difficult to form words. She finally managed to say she had never owned anything so beautiful, that she had only hoped for a basic used car that worked, that she didn't know how to begin thanking him and everyone who had contributed. Chen told her the best thanks would be her continuing to be the incredible mother and worker she already was, continuing to show her son that hard work mattered. He added that part of why he wanted to help was because he saw in Keisha the same spirit that had driven him when he was building his business, the refusal to give up even when circumstances seemed impossible. The car presentation ceremony was covered by every local news station and shared widely on social media. Images of Keisha embracing Chen, of her sitting in the car for the first time, of tears running down her face as she realized she would never have to make the 18-mile walk again, became iconic in the local community. But for Keisha, the real significance wasn't about the car itself, but about what it represented. Hours of her life given back to her, energy she could put into being with Marcus instead of walking dark roads, the dignity of being able to go to work without constant physical exhaustion. The first day Keisha drove to work in her new car, she arrived 45 minutes early because she had overcompensated, not fully trusting that a journey that took 4.5 hours on foot could be completed in 20 minutes. She sat in the Sunrise Diner parking lot with the engine running, the heat keeping her warm, and cried from relief and gratitude. Her boss, Mike, who had employed Keisha for 3 years and knew about her walks but hadn't had resources to help her, came out to the parking lot and knocked on her window. When Keisha rolled down the window, Mike said he was raising her wage from $12.50 to $50 per hour that he should have done. This before, but business had been tight, that watching the community rally around her had made him realize he needed to do his part too. Keisha's second employer at the office building also made changes. Her supervisor offered her a full-time position with benefits instead of part-time cleaning work, but Keisha declined, explaining she wanted to keep her current schedule to spend evenings helping Marcus with homework and putting him to bed. The supervisor then offered to increase her pay rate from $11 to $14 per hour, which Keisha accepted gratefully. Between raises from both jobs, Keisha's annual income would increase by approximately $12,000, an amount that would make a tremendous difference in her ability to build savings and provide for Marcus. But the media attention also brought some unexpected challenges. Marcus's absent father, who hadn't contacted or financially supported Keisha in 8 years, suddenly appeared claiming he wanted to be involved in Marcus's life. Keisha suspected his appearance was motivated by media coverage and potential access to raised funds rather than genuine paternal interest. She consulted with an attorney who offered pro bono services after hearing her story, and the attorney advised documenting everything and being prepared to establish formal legal custody if necessary. Some people in the community expressed negative opinions about Keisha's situation, arguing she shouldn't receive special help just because her story became public when other people were struggling silently. Online commentators criticized the amount of money raised, claiming it could have been used more efficiently to help multiple people instead of one. Keisha was hurt by these criticisms, but tried to focus on the overwhelming positivity rather than the small negativity. Jennifer helped Keisha develop a thicker skin about online comments, reminding her that people who criticized had never walked 18 miles to work and didn't understand what she had endured. The decision about what to do with excess funds from the fundraiser became a community matter. Keisha worked with Jennifer and Captain Rodriguez to create a plan. $15,000 would be placed in a college savings fund for Marcus, earning interest until he was ready for college. $10,000 would go to Keisha's emergency fund to cover unexpected needs and give her a financial cushion for the first time in her adult life. $5,000 would pay for car insurance and other associated costs of vehicle ownership for the next year. The remaining $55,000 would be used to establish a permanent fund administered through a local nonprofit organization that would provide transportation assistance to other working families in similar situations. The Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund, as it became known, was structured to provide help to individuals who were working but struggling with reliable transportation. The fund could help with car repairs, insurance payments, public bus passes, or in cases like Keisha's, facilitate vehicle donation when appropriate. Keisha was invited to serve on an advisory committee overseeing fund distribution, a position she accepted because she wanted to ensure other workers facing transportation barriers would receive the type of help that had changed her life. 6 months after receiving the car, Keisha's life had changed in both large and small ways. The most obvious change was physical. Her body began recovering from months of relentless exertion. Blisters on her feet finally healed completely. Chronic pain in her legs and back gradually diminished. She gained back some weight she had lost, looking healthier and having more energy. But, perhaps even more significantly, she was sleeping 5 to 6 hours per night instead of 3 to 4, a difference that affected everything from her mood to her ability to concentrate at work. The extra hours Keisha saved by not having to walk allowed her to be more present in Marcus's life. She now arrived home from work at the diner with energy to actually engage with his homework instead of simply checking it while fighting to keep her eyes open. She could cook proper meals instead of relying on quick and cheap food. She had time to attend parent-teacher conferences, to volunteer in Marcus's classroom, to do normal parent things that had been impossible when every free minute had been consumed by walking or recovering from walking. Marcus noticed the change in his mother. He told her one day that she smiled more now, that she seemed less tired. The observation made Keisha realize how much the stress of the previous situation had affected not just her, but her son, who had witnessed his mother's constant struggle even when she tried to protect him from the worst of it. Marcus also benefited from the greater financial stability. Keisha could afford to buy him appropriate school supplies, new clothes when he outgrew them, rather than relying on thrift stores, occasional outings to the amusement park, or movies that made him feel more normal compared to peers. Officer Marcus Thompson remained in contact with Keisha, checking in periodically to see how she was adjusting to her new normal. He occasionally stopped at the Sunrise Diner during patrol for a quick coffee, using the opportunity to chat with Keisha about how Marcus was doing in school or about challenges she was navigating. Thompson had come to see Keisha almost like a younger sister, someone he felt a protective responsibility toward. His wife Jennifer had become a genuine friend to Keisha, two mothers connecting over challenges of raising children and sharing advice. Keisha's story continued having a ripple impact on the community. The Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund, that had been established with excess funds from her fundraiser, had already helped 23 other working families. The fund had paid for car repairs that allowed a single mother to keep her job at a factory 15 miles away. It had covered 3 months of bus passes for an elderly man working night shift at a hospital. It had facilitated donation of a van to a family with a disabled child who needed accessible transportation to medical appointments. Each person helped by the fund represented someone who could have ended up in a situation similar to Keisha's, forced to choose between giving up employment or making unsustainable sacrifices to reach it. The committee administering the fund developed careful criteria to ensure assistance went to people genuinely working but facing transportation barriers, rather than people simply looking for free money. Keisha participated in monthly committee meetings where applications were reviewed and decisions were made, her perspective as someone who had personally experienced transportation challenges making valuable contribution to deliberations. Some of the fund assistance recipients contacted Keisha personally to thank her, knowing her story had led to the program's creation. A woman named Maria, a single mother of 2 daughters who had been about to lose her job because her car needed a new transmission she couldn't afford, visited Keisha at the diner. Maria said the fund's assistance had saved not just her job, but her sense of dignity, that not having to choose between feeding her daughters and fixing her car had removed a crushing weight from her shoulders. The encounter reminded Keisha of why she had agreed to allow her story to be shared publicly, despite initial discomfort with attention. Robert Chen, the dealership owner who had donated the car to Keisha, became an advocate for transportation assistance for working families. He started a program at his dealership, providing discounted maintenance to people referred by the Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund. Chen also established a scholarship program at the local technical school for students interested in becoming auto mechanics, specifically targeting students from low-income backgrounds. He said meeting Keisha and seeing her determination despite obstacles had reminded him of why he had entered business in the first place, not just to make money, but to make a difference in the community. The sheriff's department experienced a cultural shift, partly as a result of Keisha's story. Captain Rodriguez used the case as a teaching study during officer training sessions, emphasizing the importance of actually seeing people they encountered during patrol rather than simply processing them through established protocols. He pointed out Thompson could have easily simply checked Keisha's ID and moved on, but instead he had taken time to understand her situation, leading to an outcome that benefited both individual and broader community. The story also inspired other officers to pay more attention to people they encountered during patrols, to ask questions about circumstances rather than make assumptions. Multiple officers reported encountering people in difficult situations who needed connection to resources rather than law enforcement, using Keisha's story as a model for how law enforcement could serve a broader social function beyond just arresting criminals. Some community members who had been skeptical or critical about police began seeing the department in a more positive light, recognizing officers could be both protectors and facilitators of community well-being. But not everything was perfectly positive. Marcus's absent father, Derek Williams, continued trying to insert himself into the situation despite Keisha's resistance. Derek claimed he had been dealing with mental health issues that prevented him from being present, that he was now in a better place and wanted a relationship with his son. Keisha was skeptical, noting Derek's mental health problems apparently hadn't prevented him from working or maintaining relationships with other people, only from supporting the son he had created. When Derek filed a court petition for visitation rights, Keisha had to hire an attorney and prepare for a custody battle she had never anticipated having to fight. The legal process was emotionally draining and financially costly despite the attorney working at a reduced rate. Keisha had to provide documentation of 8 years of zero support from Derek, had to explain to a court social worker about the stability she had provided for Marcus versus Derek's complete absence. Marcus had to be interviewed by a court evaluator, an experience that confused and upset him because he didn't understand why a man who had never been part of his life suddenly wanted to be involved. Keisha struggled with how much to tell Marcus about Derek's motivations, wanting to protect her son from cynicism, but also wanting to prepare him for potential disappointment. The court eventually ordered limited supervised visitation, a decision Derek celebrated as a victory, but that Keisha saw as potential disruption to the stable life she had worked so hard to create. The first few visits were awkward, with Marcus reluctant and Derek seeming uncertain about how to interact with a 9-year-old who was effectively a stranger to him. Keisha kept careful notes about each visit, documenting Derek's attendance and behavior in case she needed to return to court. She also ensured Marcus had access to a counselor who could help him process confusing feelings about a father suddenly appearing after years of absence. Continued publicity around Keisha's story brought some unwelcome contacts. She received multiple emails and social media messages from people claiming to be distant relatives or old friends, many clearly interested in possible access to raised funds. Keisha had to develop thick skin about ignoring these contacts or politely declining requests for financial help from people who had never been present during her years of struggle. Jennifer helped her establish boundaries and develop standard responses to various types of unwanted contacts. 1 year after Marcus Thompson's initial encounter with Keisha on that dark highway, the Sheriff's Department organized a small ceremony recognizing Thompson for his role in helping Keisha and inspiring creation of the Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund. Thompson was embarrassed by the attention, insisting he had simply done what any decent officer would have done by stopping to check on someone walking alone before dawn. But Captain Rodriguez noted during the ceremony that, while stopping to check was standard procedure, taking time to actually listen to Keisha's story, connect her to resources, and follow through to ensure she received the help she needed went beyond basic duty. The ceremony included Keisha and Marcus, who was now 10 years old and growing into a confident young man who understood better than most kids his age about the value of hard work and perseverance. Marcus delivered a brief speech his mother had helped him prepare, thanking Officer Thompson for helping. Their family thanking the community for generosity and promising that when he grew up, he would find ways to help others the same way others had helped his mother. The speech made multiple officers present blink back tears, touched by the articulateness and maturity the situation had forced upon such a young child. Keisha also spoke, her voice stronger and more confident than it had been a year ago when she had been overwhelmed by sudden attention. She described how that morning, when Thompson stopped her, she had initially felt the familiar resignation of having to explain her situation again, but instead, she found someone who actually saw her. Keisha said the past year had taught her that accepting help wasn't weakness, but recognition, that no one got through life completely alone. She encouraged others struggling with similar challenges to reach out to available resources, to not let pride prevent them from accessing assistance that could make a transformative difference. The Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund continued growing through ongoing donations and fundraising events organized by volunteers who had been inspired by Keisha's story. By the end of the second year, the fund had assisted 87 families with various forms of transportation-related support. The committee overseeing the fund developed partnerships with local employers, auto repair shops, and dealerships to create a comprehensive support network. The program became a model of how relatively small intervention at the right moment could prevent downward spiral into unemployment and instability. Among the families helped was Maria Santos, a single mother of 2 daughters whose car had needed a new transmission, costing $2,800 she couldn't afford. Maria was working as a dental assistant, earning $16 per hour, a job she loved, and where there was potential to eventually become a dental hygienist. With additional training, but without reliable transportation, she faced losing the position. The fund covered the repair cost, allowing Maria to keep her job and eventually complete a hygienist certification program, doubling her salary within 2 years. Maria contacted Keisha personally to thank her, saying the fund's assistance had saved not just her job, but her entire career trajectory. Another recipient was James Mitchell, a 62-year-old veteran working night shift at a warehouse because he couldn't afford to retire with inadequate savings. James's car had broken down, and at his age with poor credit history from earlier financial difficulties, he couldn't obtain a loan for replacement. The fund facilitated donation of a 2012 work van from a local dealership, a vehicle that not only allowed James to keep his warehouse job, but also start a small side delivery business on weekends that increased his income by $800 per month. James said at 62 he had thought his options were exhausted, but that the transportation assistance had opened possibilities he thought were beyond his reach. Robert Chen, the dealership owner who had donated the Honda Accord to Keisha, became a champion of transportation assistance for working families. He expanded his dealership's program, providing discounted maintenance to people referred by the fund, but also began quarterly donation of a certified pre-owned vehicle through partnership with the program. Chen established criteria that vehicle donation recipients had to be people working but facing insurmountable transportation barriers, mirroring the situation Keisha had been in. Within 2 years, Chen's dealership had donated 9 vehicles to working families, each selected through a careful application and verification process. Chen said in an interview with the local business newspaper that meeting Keisha had fundamentally changed his business philosophy. He explained that as an immigrant who had built his business from nothing, he had always understood intellectually about hard work and perseverance. But meeting Keisha and hearing about her 18-mile walks had given him a visceral appreciation that some people were working 10 times harder than anyone recognized, but still struggling because of systemic barriers. Chen noted donating vehicles wasn't just charity, but investment in the community's economic stability, that workers with reliable transportation were more productive, more likely to keep jobs, and better able to contribute to the local economy. The Sunrise Diner where Keisha worked experienced a transformation of its own. Owner Mike had raised Keisha's wage from $12.50 to $15 per hour after she received the car, recognizing he should have done this before, but that her viral story had made him confront how much he had taken her dedication for granted. But Mike didn't stop there. He raised wages across the board for all kitchen staff and began offering basic health insurance to full-time employees, a benefit most small restaurants didn't provide. Mike said that while the raises and benefits cut into his profit margins, they also reduced turnover dramatically, meaning he spent less time and money training new employees. More significantly, Mike promoted Keisha to assistant manager 2 years after she received the car, recognizing her natural leadership and work ethic that had never wavered even during her hardest period. The position came with a $42,000 salary and responsibility for staff scheduling, inventory management, and training new employees. Keisha used her first-hand knowledge of challenges low-income workers faced to create carpool programs among staff and flexible scheduling that accommodated people's transportation needs. She became a mentor to younger employees, particularly single parents, sharing her own story as an example that difficult circumstances didn't have to define someone's future. Keisha's second employer at the office building implemented policy changes after learning about her situation through media coverage. The company raised her cleaning wage from $11 to $14.50 per hour and started a pilot program providing transportation vouchers to cleaning staff who worked off-peak hours when public transportation was limited. The program was funded through a small allocation from the company's corporate social responsibility budget, and within 6 months resulted in a 40% reduction in turnover among cleaning staff. Human Resources calculated that savings from not having to constantly recruit and train new cleaning employees more than paid for the cost of transportation vouchers. Marcus Thompson and Jennifer maintained a close relationship with Keisha and Marcus, becoming like extended family that provided the type of support network both had lacked. Thompson occasionally took young Marcus to baseball games or father-son events at school, providing a positive male presence that was absent due to Derek's abandonment. Jennifer helped Keisha navigate complexities of preparing for college eventually, sharing knowledge about financial aid application processes and scholarships that would have been intimidating for Keisha as the first in her family to consider higher education. But the relationship was carefully maintained to avoid any appearance of dependency or favoritism. Keisha made a point of maintaining financial independence and making her own decisions about raising Marcus. Thompson and Jennifer respected boundaries, offering support when asked, but never imposing or assuming they knew better. This dynamic allowed genuine friendship to flourish based on mutual respect, rather than saviors and saved, recognizing Keisha had saved herself through unbreakable determination, and that the community had simply provided tools she needed to make life sustainable. Derek Williams, Marcus's absent father, made several attempts to reinsert himself into Marcus's life after Keisha's story became public. His motivations were transparently about potential access to media attention and perhaps money, rather than genuine paternal concern. Derek showed up without warning at the Sunrise Diner once, trying to talk to Keisha during her shift and claiming he wanted to meet his son. Keisha remained calm but firm, telling Derek if he wanted any contact with Marcus, he would have to go through appropriate legal channels and establish a consistent pattern of financial and emotional responsibility. Derek filed a court petition for visitation rights, but after a court-appointed psychologist interviewed Marcus and reviewed Derek's history of complete abandonment, the recommendation was that contact should be restricted to supervised visits if Marcus expressed a desire to meet his father. Marcus, now old enough to articulate his own feelings, told the psychologist he was curious about his father, but also scared of being hurt, if the man disappeared again. The court ordered Derek to complete a parenting program and establish 6 months of consistent child support. Payments before visitation would be considered. Derek attended 2 parenting program sessions, then stopped participating, never made a single child support payment, and eventually stopped pursuing visitation entirely. Marcus was initially hurt, but his counselor helped him understand Derek's absence revealed Derek's character rather than Marcus's worth. Keisha used the situation as a teaching opportunity about responsibility, follow-through, and about how some people simply weren't capable of being the parents children deserved. She made sure Marcus' new family wasn't just about biology, but about people who showed up consistently, as the Thompson family had done, as friends and community had done. 3 years after the original encounter, Keisha had achieved milestones that would have seemed impossible during her walking days. She completed an associate degree in business administration through online classes taken during nights and weekends, often studying after Marcus was in bed. The degree opened career advancement, opportunities that previously seemed out of reach. She had been promoted again at the Sunrise Diner, now serving as general manager with a $48,000 salary and authority to make major operational decisions. Mike, the owner, was planning to eventually retire and had mentioned the possibility of Keisha buying the business when the time came. Financially, the transformation was dramatic. Keisha had paid off all debt she had accumulated during years of struggle. She had built an emergency savings fund containing $12,000, more than 10 times what she had ever had before. She was contributing regularly to a college savings account for Marcus, which now held $18,000 between raised funds and her own contributions. The Honda Accord Chen had donated still ran perfectly with only 78,000 miles, meticulously maintained through Chen's dealership's free service program. Keisha had never imagined owning such a reliable car or feeling so secure about her financial future. Marcus thrived in ways that reflected both increased support and the example of resilience his mother had set. He maintained a consistent honor roll in school, participated on the basketball team, and had developed an interest in engineering, inspired partly by visits to Chen's dealership, where mechanics had shown him how cars worked. Marcus told his guidance counselor he wanted to eventually go to college and study mechanical or automotive engineering, perhaps work for a company like Tesla, or eventually start his own repair business. The ambitions were encouraged by Keisha, who saved every penny she could to make Marcus's college education a reality. But perhaps the most significant impact of Keisha's experience wasn't in her own life, but in the broader conversations her story had inspired. Her story became cited in policy discussions about minimum wage, public transportation, and barriers working families faced. State legislators introduced a bill creating tax credits for employers who assisted employees with transportation costs, citing Keisha's story as evidence of why such support was necessary. While the bill faced resistance from business groups concerned about costs, there was growing recognition that transportation was a critical employment access issue. Keisha was invited to testify at a legislative committee hearing about transportation barriers faced by low-income workers. She appeared at the state capitol, accompanied by Jennifer and Captain Rodriguez, nervous but determined to represent countless other workers in similar situations. Keisha spoke without notes, simply describing what her days had been like during her walking period, the raw numbers of hours spent walking instead of with her son, the physical toll on her body, the emotional weight of never knowing if she would be able to continue maintaining the impossible schedule. She explained she hadn't been lazy or seeking handouts, but working 2 jobs while raising a son, and that the only thing holding her back was access to reliable transportation. Keisha's testimony was captured on video and shared widely, reaching a national audience and being cited in newspaper editorials and news segments about the working poor. Some conservative commentators argued her story was an exception, and that most people on public assistance weren't working as hard. But research cited by advocates demonstrated millions of working Americans still lived at or near poverty, often because costs like transportation consumed large portions of already inadequate wages. Keisha's story humanized the statistics, putting a face and narrative to numbers about struggling working families. The dash camera footage of the original encounter between Thompson and Keisha remained archived with the sheriff's department, but became regularly used in training programs for recruits. Captain Rodriguez showed the video during sessions on community policing, pausing at key moments to discuss Thompson's decisions. He pointed out how Thompson had been right to stop to check on a potentially dangerous situation, but also how Thompson had quickly recognized Keisha represented no threat and had transitioned from law enforcement mode to community assistance mode. Rodriguez emphasized an officer's job wasn't just arresting criminals, but serving and protecting the community, that sometimes protection meant connecting people to resources they needed. The story became part of Springfield's identity, a story residents shared with pride as an example of their community at its best. When visitors or new residents asked about the Springfield Transportation Assistance Fund and how it started, people told about Keisha and her 18-mile walk. The story resonated because it touched on universal themes of struggle, perseverance, and ordinary people making extraordinary difference when they paid attention to needs around them. Keisha remained humble about her role in inspiring changes. When people called her a hero or talked about her courage, she redirected conversation to Thompson, who stopped to actually listen to her, to Chen, who donated the car, to Jennifer, who organized the fundraiser, to countless community members who had contributed. Keisha insisted she had simply done what she had to do to care for her son, that the real story was about people choosing to help, when help wasn't obligation, but choice. She often said her experience had taught her there was more kindness in the world than cynicism would suggest, that most people wanted to make a difference but often didn't know how, that sometimes all that was needed was someone sharing a need and allowing others to respond. Years later, when Marcus was a teenager preparing to apply for colleges, he wrote an application essay about watching his mother's determination during her walking period. He described memories of being young, watching his mother leave before dawn, not fully understanding where she was going, but knowing she was sacrificing for him. Marcus wrote about the moment when a police officer stopped her and how initially he had been scared something bad was happening, but how instead that encounter became a turning point that changed their entire family's trajectory. He concluded the essay saying, the experience had taught him that perseverance mattered, but that asking for help when needed wasn't weakness, that building community where people supported each other created a foundation for everyone to thrive. Keisha cried when she read Marcus's essay, not from sadness, but from pride and recognition her son had internalized the lessons she had hoped to teach. He didn't see their difficult years as trauma to be overcome, but as foundation that had shaped his values and given him perspective many of his privileged peers lacked. Marcus understood he was fortunate not, despite his mother's struggle, but because of it. Because it had shown him challenges could be faced, that character was revealed not during easy times, but during the impossible. That accepting help when offered allowed a person to eventually become someone who could help others. The story of Keisha Williams and her 18-mile walk became more than a story about transportation or community assistance. It became a narrative about the dignity of work, about the strength required to keep showing up when every day seemed unsustainable, about the compassion of strangers becoming family, about how one person's decision to actually see another person could set in motion transformation that touched hundreds of lives. It remained as a reminder that behind every statistic about struggling working families was a real person with a complete story, dreams, and determination that deserved to be recognized and supported. And it demonstrated that while systems failed and barriers remained, individual people choosing to act with kindness could create real and lasting change.